When you think of a Stevie Wonder album, chances are it'll most likely be something from the 1970s, as it's widely known as his classic era. He put out 7 albums during that decade. It was by far his most prolific era, and the majority of those albums are seen as absolute classics and some of the best and most iconic records in music history, especially songs in the key of life, which is still a staple of funk and soul to this very day. As a matter of fact, it was originally meant to be his final album, his final big statement before he retired from the music industry to focus more on charity work. But clearly, he didn't end up going through with that plan. I mean, he still did the charity work, but he didn't quit music. After the 1970s, Stevie would put out 5 albums over the years, as well as a few side projects. His releases definitely became a lot more few and far between after the 70s, and a lot of people discredit most of this work and believe that he sort of lost his spark after songs in the key of life. His post-classic era work isn't really talked about that much, especially when compared to his most popular albums, and honestly, I don't think that's right. I think we should shine a light on this late period work to see if it holds a candle to the past music Stevie made in his prime, starting with the album he put out right at the start of the 80s, Harder Than July. Harder Than July came out right at the turn of the decade. It was his first true studio album since Songs in the Key of Life 4 years earlier. Sure, he put out Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants in 1979, but that was more of a movie soundtrack than an actual fully fledged release. At the time, this was the longest he had ever gone without putting out a record, and releases would come out slower and slower as years went on. Now, Harder Than July had the daunting task of following up the best and most influential album of all time, and did it top it? No, of course not, it's impossible. But Harder Than July is still a pretty good album that contains a few fantastic songs. Lately is one of Stevie's best and most melancholic ballads to date. Same with Rocket Love, which has gotta have one of my favorite hooks from his entire discography. Master Blaster is a reggae song that was made as a tribute to Bob Marley shortly after his passing. I think these 3 tracks easily stand alongside Stevie's absolute best work, no question. Everything else, though, it's still pretty good, to be honest. However, this is the first record since his early work to kind of feel like it's going through the motions sometimes and not doing much in terms of experimentation, besides a few exceptions. I mean, there is literally a country song on this album, so it isn't like he wasn't experimenting at all. But most of these songs are just typical Stevie Wonder songs. Not bad by any means, but kinda typical. It's a collection of really fun and funky tunes that are very enjoyable, and that's basically it. It isn't breaking new ground like his past work, but it didn't really have to. At this point, you didn't really have anything to prove. It's still a really good listen, and still manages to surprise you at certain points. And the closer, Happy Birthday, is a very important track that was made as a tribute to Martin Luther King. So yeah, Harder Than July isn't very ambitious, but that doesn't at all make it bad. It still manages to be a pretty great record. Before his next album, though, he'd put out a compilation called Original Musicarium. It's basically a greatest hits record, but we did get 4 new songs, one of which being Ribbon in the Sky, which is an absolutely outstanding song and one of his best, as well as That Girl, a personal favorite of mine. But he wouldn't put out a full-length record until 5 years later. In my humble opinion, this is by far the most underrated and overhated Stevie album. This seriously makes it into my top 5, which doesn't seem to be a very popular opinion based on what I've seen. A lot of people pinpoint this as the album where Stevie quote-unquote sold out and lost his spark, but neither of those things are even remotely true. This thing is fantastic and a real time capsule of its era. I consider In Square Circle to be a lot more inventive and ambitious when compared to Harder Than July. And as someone who loves the new wave and synthpop of the 80s, hearing Stevie experiment with that sort of sound while adding his own spin to it makes for a super interesting listen. Despite being a good representation of the decade that it came out, it doesn't at all sound dated and it's actually aged super well. There are songs like Part-Time Lover, Land of Lala, and I Love You Too Much that have such a unique sound when compared to his past work, but they still manage to feel like Stevie Wonder songs in their execution. Stranger on the Shore of Love is a fantastic track that deserves a lot more props than it gets, and Overjoyed nails that classic Motown sound that put Stevie on the map in the first place. You can just tell how much fun he had playing with all these different synths and weird sounds, and that makes every song on this album just beam with energy and creativity. If you haven't heard this album in full, I highly recommend it. It's such an overlooked record. But unfortunately, it is the last album of his that I consider to be, you know, that great. Yeah, I don't really like this one, to be honest. Which feels so weird to say. I mean, it doesn't feel right that someone so insanely talented and creative can make something this empty feeling. Characters continues the synth-heavy sound from In Square Circle, but it almost completely lacks the character and vibrantness that record had. I don't know if I'd say it's straight up bad. I mean, it takes a lot for an album to be straight up bad, but I do think it's a little bit worse than just being a bad record. It's unremarkable. It's kind of just there. Nothing on this album really stands out to me. I mean, the opening track, You Will Know, is decent, and so is Skellington's, but besides that, it's not very memorable, to be honest. I mean, there's a song with Michael Jackson on it, and it's okay, I guess. I don't even know how it's possible, though. Two musical legends on one song, you'd think it would be amazing, but I barely remember how it sounds. If you want to hear a better collaboration between Stevie and Michael, check out I Can't Help It from Off the Wall. Stevie doesn't sing on the track, but he did write it, and it's a fantastic song. Anyway, yeah, Characters isn't really bad, but it's just kind of boring. With Each Beat of My Heart's a pretty good song, though. 8 years after Characters, Wonder would release Conversation Piece. And it's okay. Once again, it's an album that exists, and that's kind of all I have to say about it. It still isn't bad, but it doesn't come close to the highs he was able to reach from the past. This album, as well as the last, also sound pretty dated, and they're the only albums from Wonder I would ever say that about. I mean, this sounds like any run-of-the-mill 90s R&B album, which doesn't mean that it's bad, it's just once again pretty unremarkable. Also, most of these songs are far too long. I mean, this dude is no stranger to long-ass songs, but his past songs earned those runtimes. These ones, not so much. If I were to describe Conversation Piece and Characters in one word, it would be formulaic. 10 years after Conversation Piece, we get what is, as of right now, the final Stevie Wonder album, and the only full-length project he's put out in 21st Century. And it's a massive improvement over the last two. Maybe taking all that time off was good for his craft, because most of these songs are pretty good and actually memorable. It doesn't touch his best stuff, but there are still a few tracks that I genuinely love on this one. From the Bottom of My Heart is a pretty standard love song, which we've heard tons of in Wonder's discography, but it's still a really catchy and fun track with a great chord progression. Sweet Is Somebody I Know is a pretty good one as well, but Moon Blue is definitely the centerpiece of this thing. This song is gorgeous. It's the only track on this album that I'd say stands alongside his best work, and I'd rank it decently high in his discography. Everything else is pretty standard fare for an early 2000s R&B album, but I honestly feel like this sound actually works really well for Wonder, and this album is aged pretty well. It doesn't sound that dated. It is a little bit too long for what it has to offer, but it's still a record that has a lot to like about it. I love you. Stevie's been pretty quiet since the release of A Time to Love, and he hasn't put out that much since, besides the occasional miscellaneous single or collaboration. He's worked with Ariana Grande, Travis Scott, Snoop Dogg, Pharrell, Elton John, and many others in the past 20 years, but he hasn't released a full-length project. Honestly though, I don't think he needs to. Stevie Wonder has an amazing legacy, with more classics than most artists can even dream of having. He could put out the worst album of all time, and it wouldn't change the fact that he's one of the best to ever do it. His most recent work was a single he put out last year called Can We Fix Our Nation's Broken Heart, which was followed up by a short tour. I doubt we'll ever be seeing a new album from him, but like I said, I believe he's done more than enough to make his mark in music history. Anyway, that's enough out of me. Goodbye.